My name is Boyd Hemphill. I'm the CTO, nominally a Victory CTO. We do all kinds of things at the fractional level. I've been fractional off and on since 2017. I specialize in startup rescue myself. I have a background in DevOps, the public cloud, and relational databases as far as the technical stuff goes. Um, I'm a community organizer. I started Austin DevOps in 2012 with 13 people and grew it to nearly 3,000 before I handed it over when I moved away from Austin. I was involved in the growth of the Docker Austin meetup with Ollie and Otter, actually, share. Um, and these days I'm semi-retired. I try to keep my work-life balance to about 20 hours of work, which means as a workaholic, I managed to get in, 40 hours of work a week. So, it's cool to be part-time, but working full-time. Today I offered to talk about team empowerment, which is one aspect of psychological safety in the workplace. Psychological safety is a really big topic. And if we want to delve more into that, I would love to listen to other people's thoughts. So, if you're thinking about doing something as a lightning talk one Thursday, and you're looking for a topic, I know I'd come and listen. My premise is that we often rise as leaders because we're the brightest amongst the group. The dichotomy is that even in a startup, as we rise and we leave a hole behind and that hole is filled, others become brighter in that aspect of the company. So ensuring that our teams are the smallest unit of work, not the individual, and that those teams are more than the sum of their individual parts. We ensure a healthy organization in terms of its operating and its operational excellence, which is to say that it's important that we not only don't know all the things, but that we ensure that that the information that is out there is shared with everybody. In order to do that, it's important to build trust. So when I think about team empowerment, I think about this in two ways. The team needs to trust each other, regardless of where I'm sitting, whether I'm in a meeting or not in a meeting. There need to be norms that exist, and the team needs to trust that those norms are going to be followed. I typically try to build this culture in the team. I do believe that culture is something that comes from the top down, with a bi-weekly meeting that's owned by the team. I'll get more into the mechanics of that a little later. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm the observer. I don't know about you, but I go through an insane number of gyrations to hire amazing people. And I want those amazing people to say amazing things, which if I'm just in the background listening and taking notes and what have you, they're more likely to do. And that gives me an incredible pulse on the team, what their concerns are, what their frustrations are, what their wins are, how they interact, and where problems may arise. So you can think of it as mitigating the observer effect to some point. My role in any meeting is to drive decisions and action items and get closure on those action items. So if I have 6 people on the team, I want them telling me what needs to get done. I want them defining what the definition of done is for something. I want them telling me what those action items are, because that's a form of commitment and those things get done. So quite frankly, a team that knows that it's able to identify a problem and fix the problem is going to fix the problem. And so things just don't fester. That further builds trust in me as a leader. So I commit to doing things. For example, if the team needs another team to behave a different way, that's not their problem, that's my problem. So as a leader, I need to go to that other team or that other department and try to make it right. So I'll commit to things. I take action items away from the meeting, but I try not to overcommit. It's important that I'm always seen as, if I say I'm going to do something, that I go and get it done for the team. And then I'm constantly marketing the team's efforts, both where they can see it and where they cannot. So if something cool happens, I want them to know I think it's cool. And I want everybody around me who's impacted by that to know that it's cool as well. This further tells the team that the behaviors that they're talking about, hey, this is a problem, we need to fix it. I'm not comfortable with X. Have we considered having a team agreement? All of these things that form team empowerment, the team defining itself, are bolstered by the idea that I'm going to go out and market that. In one of my last full-time roles, I did this enough that ultimately I was asked to run workshops internally on how our team was operating. And a lot of our practices were adopted across the organization. I at the director level, and then for other directors, managers, even VPs in some cases. So, so again, market, and then I was given some great advice at one point in my career because I had a habit of overcommitting to say yes and when, or no and why. And so if I say yes, I should be able to tell somebody when. And if I say no, I should be able to tell somebody why. So it's okay for me to say no as a leader. You know, if they want to go and boil the ocean, you know, here's a lighter, good luck. But I have to tell them why. Hey, you're trying to boil the ocean here. You need to break that into smaller pieces and prioritize them. Would be, you know, a way to, you know, if, hey, we should move all the things to Docker because Docker is cool. All right, well, you know, that's just not a great way to spend the company's money necessarily. So I need to be able to say why. All right. So the team has a mission. It could be develop features. It could be operate the software in the cloud at a 5 nines SLA, whatever that is. And as leaders, we tend to over focus actually all our calories on the work towards exactly that mission and nothing else. In other words, we're thinking about the system we built or the system that we operate, and we're not thinking about the system of people that are actually doing the work to accomplish those things. And I'll get more into this notion I have of second system in a moment. A team has a process for accomplishing the work. So working on enhancing that process is work. And that work should be in the ticketing system. That way it can be prioritized and managed through whatever ritual you have. If you're agile and it's backlog grooming, or if it's, you know, more waterfall and, you know, we need, you know, to think of budgets and all the other things, whatever that looks like. If you can't make that work visible, then that work is a lot less likely to get done. So for example, in a meeting when there are action items, one of the things I tell the team is on the Confluence page, when you check the box, all you're saying is that you created a ticket. You don't have to go and do it. The only time you should be doing work is if there's a ticket. And that keeps us much more organized. And again, because that work is equal to the other work, it's on the same Kanban board, it's following all the same flows, it's more likely to get done. The team feels more empowered. And I love this quote from Gene Kim in the Phoenix Project, where he says, improving daily work is more important than doing daily work. And I can't stress that enough. In his definition, daily work are those little things that you do on a day-to-day basis to get things done. And he distinguishes that from project work. Like, we're going to build this feature, it's going to take seven weeks. All right, that's project work. But the daily work that the team has, like keeping the build under 15 minutes, fixing bugs, stuff like that. If we're working to tamp down the number of bugs and always keep the build under 15 minutes and so forth and so on, our team is delivering that feature in 7 weeks instead of 17 weeks. So that's what Gene means by improving daily work is more important than doing daily work. And by giving the power to the team to think that way, I get a human system that is far more efficient, has better throughput, if you will, if you want to go down to the gold rat stuff, than a team that's only focused on delivering that next feature or migrating the infrastructure to Azure or whatever the current project of the day is. So on the whole, allowing people to operate with ownership means that those brilliant minds who have direct context on all of the details are more focused on improving things rather than that water cooler talk of, man, wouldn't it be great if we could do just this one thing? To give you a specific example, I had a guy named Manny come to me and say, we need to get SSO set up on AWS. And I'm like, nah, man, why? I get that it's convenient, but he's like, it's going to save us 250 hours a quarter. And I thought, that's wow. That's half a full-time employee of time you're telling me you're going to save. Bullshit. So he went and did some interviews. He came back to the team meeting and he said, look, here you go. It's about 250 hours a quarter. I was like, well, yeah, get that done. So not only did that impact our team, the operations team in this case, that was in and out of AWS all the time, but we wanted developers owning their stuff. You build it, you run it. So they needed to be in AWS, making that convenient for them. One, lowered friction, gave them more agency to fix things without having to involve us, and save them time as well. So we literally saved a half an FTE with that one, we're going to improve daily work. And everyone benefited from it, including the company on the whole. So that sort of agency, that sort of empowerment leads to incredible improvements. All right. So the two systems thing, as leaders, we're responsible for, pick a silo. But we forget that second system. For each team that we run, there is a system, people, that's their processes, their methods. If you want to do the lean, it's man, machine, manual. I forget all of them, but there's all of these things that go into the creation of the software system. But we don't really apply that systems thinking. We're looking at architecture and diagrams and things like that. But step back and ask yourself, what's producing this? And when you think about the power of Conway's law, the communication paths of the team are going to directly impact the quality of the software you produce in terms of its architecture. Well, this becomes really, really important. So, excuse me. So my premise is that though we're directly incentivized to think about the former, did I get those features out the door? Therefore, I got a bonus, or what have you. We would serve the business and our own bonus as well if we thought a bit harder about the second system, because that's where the leverage is. So how do I do this? Well, there's a lot of things that go into this, but this is one very specific set of mechanics. The team meeting that I run, the mechanics matter, the lean coffee aspect of it. There's a reference to this later. But how you, the leader, go about doing this, and the tone that you're setting, and making sure that you're enabling the difficult conversations is really important. To give you an example of a topic that came up once, it was, this meeting should be only 15 minutes. And so the team voted on that as the most important topic to discuss that day. The team decided that the meeting should be 15 minutes going forward. And I made the meeting 15 minutes long after that. Now, you may be thinking, yeah, engineers don't want to be in a meeting, blah, blah, blah. What was actually happening was we had eliminated so much cruft that we just didn't have a lot to talk about. Things were going really, really well. If you think about that as a barometer, me as the leader of the team, knowing that things are going really well because there's nothing to solve, there's no friction that the team is talking about, it's fantastic. And about 2 months later, there was a topic in that 15-minute long team meeting. This meeting needs to be 45 minutes. That was voted on, it was discussed, and we set the meeting to an hour. Let that sink in. I had engineers ask me for a longer meeting. And additionally, they were telling me, what was unhealthy in the very agenda that they were pushing forward. I really did have my finger on the pulse of the team. So what's going on in the meeting? The first 5 to 7, 8 minutes are, we're looking at the topics that they source throughout the week. They have 3 votes. They spread those votes out across them. The thing with the most votes is the thing that I set a 5-minute timer on. And they start discussing. Sometimes they'll involve me as a subject matter expert or something like that. That's fine. And then at the end of those 5 minutes, they tell me, I want to keep going. We're neutral. I want to move on. I won't let them move on, or at least I try not to, unless a decision's been made or action items have been created that people own. And again, those action items are create these tickets so that those go into the work and we get those prioritized. So again, that setup and the facilitation of it gives me the pulse of the team, and it ensures that the team is working on what it deems to be important. And now you run into the director's problem. So how does this scale up? As directors, we manage people who lead teams rather than the teams directly. Now, I'm going to bend Patrick Lencioni's notion of first team for a minute and say, they're actually your first team. That's what you should be paying attention to, not the individual contributors on each of their teams. But the same reasoning still applies. I spent an enormous amount of intellectual capital and time to assemble that team of people because I trust them, because they're intelligent, because they're great at what they do. So they need to be empowered. So the same meeting format works for me there, except that generally, instead of talking about technical things at the director level, you're often talking about communication between teams, friction in project management and delivery, schedules, things of that nature, or top-down stuff. Hey, reviews are coming up. So how are we doing reviews? How are we going to make sure that we're consistent? What's our process for that? Oh, we don't have a process for that. Who's going to go develop a process for that? Et cetera, et cetera. So But again, that team of people telling me that they don't feel confident in being, giving solid reviews tells me that I have some opportunities to coach, that we need to get some stuff written down and so forth. I have my finger on the pulse of the team. So again, the director's dilemma. We still need to be able to run a staff meeting. And this is true at the executive level too, where we bring the agenda because we are responsible. So I actually separate these things. My staff, and what I noticed the 3 times I've done this is my staff meeting ended up being about 15 minutes after 3 to 5 months. And my team meeting fluctuated in terms of how much time it took, because most of the things that I was bringing to a staff meeting before I sort of landed on this way of operating were often things that the team wanted to discuss anyway. And so by pitching it back to them, hey, what do you want to do? Who's going to take responsibility for it? The things that I actually needed to push down to them were far, far smaller. And when I did have to push something down, it was accepted as, okay, this is just something that we need to do. Let's go figure out how to do it. Oftentimes, the go figure out how to do it came up in the team meeting, in terms of, hey, we need help, or hey, I need help with this thing. Can I get a couple of you to collaborate with me, et cetera, et cetera. And so as you're thinking about empowering your team, ask yourself where you sit. Are you the boss? Or are you leading the charge? I try like hell to be this person. I don't always make it, but just in the attempts, I find that people are willing to speak up more and people are willing to collaborate with me more, so that the outcome is generally better than if I'm the one always pointing and saying, go this direction. And with that, I've already posted this in the general channel. So there are links to click here. Basically, what I'm telling you is just a synthesis of these works, and some references if you like. So let me stop there. Questions, comments, concerns? You can tell me I'm an idiot. It's okay. I am.
So either you gonna go first or am I? You go first.
Yeah, yeah.
John, sorry. I don't know.
No worries. It's
Sorry
all good.
about
I work with so many Johns. I'm used to being called Cedar. This is good stuff, boy. I mean, it's, sitting down and figuring out how to make people successful. I spend a lot of time trying to create future me, right? And that is now a 25-year career arc plus. And I'm at the point where I've synthesized it into a handful of lessons, and I'm struggling a little bit right now with how to turn somebody for the first time into a C-level or VP level executive. And I'm starting to do that now a little bit more and more. And I've also realized that my cohort of people that are, -5 to -10 years after me, I created a gap over a course of, doing this for 15 years where I didn't have new grads to preach to and teach. And I've just recently spent a little bit of time plugging that gap and talking to people at universities to build a presentation to help them get to the point that they are here, right? And this is all really good stuff. It's the whole, how do you get your team to own things and to be self-accountable? And it's really funny because the thing that I really clued into that I really like to hear is that it's not really a question, it's just a comment, is that pushing the decision making down just inspires so much ownership for people. And we have that happening where I spend a lot of my time working on stuff with people, and I tell them, it's like, okay, well, what do you want to do here? And it's like, what do you think I should do? It's like, well, I want you to tell me what you want to do, and then I'm going to ask you, I'm going to manage you Socratically, right? I'm just going to ask you questions. I'm not going to tell you anything. It's like, well, how do you think that could break? Have you thought about what's going to happen when the database goes down, right? And I'll know all the stuff that's about to happen, but I don't want to tell them. I want to ask them and see if they'll figure it out on their own, right? And the confidence that inspires in people and giving them the ability to grow is super awesome. And then on top of that, as they do that, they become more comfortable, and the psychological safety that you discovered, the ability to take risks and fail, is really important as you build up your teams. And I'm working with someone right now as a coach, and they are still, there's a 50% chance that they'll see something that's about to go bad and they'll intervene and fix it themselves. And I'm like, that's the worst thing you could be doing right now. You've got to cure yourself of that instinct. You got to figure out how to empower your people to patch over those holes and fix those mistakes themselves. So I've never seen the team as the smallest unit work before. I really like that. So this was really cool. anyway, that's
that team topologies is 180 pages of solid gold, to be honest. If you haven't taken a look at that, Manuel Pass, and I can't remember his co-author, it's just brilliant stuff. Even if you don't agree with all of it, it's just the way it gets you thinking. It's super useful. In terms of all of it, if you're going to push the decision making down, remember that you're pushing trust down. But if you just say, and I got into just a knockdown, drag out argument with a VP of mine once when I was a director. He was like, "Boyd, I trust you, and forgive the language." I was like, "I don't want your fucking trust. I need your help." So there's definitely a line to walk there where somebody is actually asking you for help because they don't want to violate your trust and they're stressed out about that. So there's there's a certain emotional quotient you have to have. Be aware. Yeah.
The number of times that somebody will flat out ask for your help, though, is, very, very seldom. I try to find out. It's like, when I talk to people as to how they're doing, it's like, do you have any concerns? What's keeping you up at night? What do you need help with? Nobody likes to answer that question. It's the weirdest thing. So yeah, it's been probably 5 or more years since somebody said, "I really need your help with this." It's kind of interesting.
So that's the format of the team meeting. Rather than somebody having to come to me and say, "I need help," they go into that team meeting saying, "This is a problem," which is often an expression of "I need help."
Yeah.
So the way it was described to me by a couple of people who were raving introverts, one of them on the spectrum, was I have a safe place to talk about stuff because we're all in it together.
Yeah.
And that was a side effect that I did not intend when I first went that direction. I just realized that the hack was by them sourcing that agenda, 2 things were going to happen. One, all the, "Hey, isn't this a good idea?" And then 2 hours later, they get back to work on what they were supposed to be working, was going to stop because they could put that in a place where they knew it was not only going to be talked about, but it was going to be actioned on eventually. And then the other part of it was that agenda tells me where it hurts. And because I know they're helping each other, I know that that person is going to intrinsically get help. So then it's just the 10% of the time when it's a me they need the help from. And so it was really, the first time I did this, it was really interesting to watch. And then some of the more vocal folks talking about like, this is an incredible hack. This is what's happening when you're not looking and so forth and so on. So
cool.
So real quick, I feel dirty saying that the people that report to me are my first team when actually your first team is your peers and your boss, right? So do keep in mind that once you're in middle management, you're in this weird spot that Lencioni just never really talks about because he's an executive level thinker, not a organizational thinker.
Yeah.
So insofar as that goes, I found that when I'm working at the director level, it's really difficult for me to go into like the meeting with the CTO, for example, and be fully present when I care so much about the people that are reporting. That I'm still trying to figure that one out, John.
I hear you. Cool.
I was just going to ask you about that, by the way. Sometimes I wonder how many companies are out there that one would really enjoy working at. Like, how many people really care for their people and the results? And I was going to ask you, like, how long does running this process take at a new company? And clearly, support from top is critical. We're going in. I love that saying, by the way. Improving the daily work is better than. Sorry, what was the quote again?
Improving daily work is more important than doing daily work. And that's sorry, let me just stay here. Yeah, that comes out of this book. That was Gene Kim who wrote the Phoenix Project and the Unicorn Project. And
how many people?
Yeah, I've never had an original thought.
You know what they say, right? There's no such thing as an original thought, but you guys have far more experience and exposure to executives than I do. how many people really think about this, like this idea of improving daily work as opposed to just get it done?
Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
my experience, very few, unfortunately. John, what about you, man?
So that's a tough one because I spend a lot of time trying to think about that because it's I try to get everything into a measurable graph because when you're trying to scale your teams and get to the point where you have 100 people across 4 different or 5 different teams doing stuff, I spend a lot of time with the people on those teams saying, I need you to stop being a point on this graph and I need you to figure out how to move the line. So it's basically I've never really phrased it that way, but thinking about how to get stuff done and how to do your daily work is generally done through the process of you've made an estimate, we put this into a graph, and now this line is freaking makes no sense. So I need you to figure out how to smooth this line. And so that's usually what we spend a lot of time doing. And the framework I use for that, for talking to people, is about usually what happens is there's a gap in shared understanding somewhere. And it's usually something that has been tribally created and not communicated or expressed in a way that can be captured by the organization. And so that's the root cause of all the things that we've done. So for us, it's making sure that, there's a good path to measure what we're doing and put it into a system and then sit down and say, okay, how do we improve that? And it's like, a whole pile of things that generally, you sit down and you look at it. Okay, this is taking a long time because we don't have good unit tests, or this is taking a long time because we keep breaking stuff in production. And it's sitting down and saying, okay, how do we improve those things? So that, or the release process, right? Releasing stuff into production and the steps that we're doing for this are horrible. And the way that we're doing this is bad. And we need to rethink that and get it to the point that it's push button. And so, making those tactical sort of velocity changes has been usually what I try to push on people and get to as fast as possible.
But it seems like what Boyd is doing is actually taking out time for active reflection on, okay, here is what all we do, and here is how we interact, if I may, Boyd, uh, at a human level also, right? So I'm a huge fan of like figuring out the human relationships. I feel like so a lot of the stuff, John, that you just said, it happens. People aren't on the same page. Sorry, was it you
Yeah.
or was it Boyd who said this? But and so I'm amazed, but okay, so not a lot of people take out time for team self-reflection and how
Yeah.
do we improve what we're doing.
Which is
I,
ironic because doesn't Scrum dictate a sprint
because
retrospective each week or each
yeah,
2 weeks or whatever?
Yeah.
no,
And,
there's no psychological safety there. Like, sorry, go ahead, John.
yeah. The retrospective thing is fascinating because most people have this conversation about what they did differently and then they get back to work. And
It's like,
every time I get into a system where, I start working with people and we get to our first retrospective and they'll put it all up there, it's like, who owns these? You didn't put an owner on a single item. How do you expect anything to happen here? Right. And then the next thing that happens is you get to the next retrospective and say, okay, let's review the action items by the owners. And then people are like, what? And then they panic. Right? It's like, well, you said you're going to own this thing and you're going to improve it. So what did you do to make things better here? Right. And that's a really tough one because, it's one thing to take a little victory lap and talk about what we did and high five all around and then point out, it's like, hey, our PRs are taking too long. And so said they're going to figure out how to fix that. And then you ask them, what progress have you made? And they're like, oh crap, I was so busy working on stuff, I never got to it. I'm like,
So
But that's
the
exactly what
direct
you're talking about, the improving work. And it's people it's really tough to get people into the mindset to do that.
so the real fix for that for me was not the philosophical statement of improving daily work. It was making the work visible. That's the Dominica here,
Yeah.
which is to say the action items on the whatever you're doing to take minutes or whatnot aren't good enough. The work needs to be described in the work system so that it is equal to the other work that's going on, and it can be
Yeah.
tracked and collaborated upon in the same way. For example, if we're making a process change, even though there's no PR, somebody's written something down, it goes into in review, which is essentially saying, hey, go review my work, and people will go and
Yeah.
comment on it. Yeah, so making the
how
work
much time?
visible and
So,
go
sorry,
ahead.
can you comment on how much time for your what's your rule of thumb? Should be spending
So,
talking about the sort of stuff? Um,
so
like it's it's like, okay, you said tickets need to get done, and then there's like, okay, documenting, here is what I did, here's the process change I made. Like, okay, let me explain this with a personal example. One of the things I struggle with is perhaps I have a lot of things in my head and it's all up and down, but I feel like even the leadership team and the entire company, they need to know what all I'm thinking, how we're going about things. And so a lot of such process changes perhaps, right? Have been done, but I can either get those done or I can write them down. Um, is there a rule of thumb, sorry, in terms of how many hours that should take?
yeah,
Repeatedly?
so I'm gonna kind of glom on to two different questions that you asked, because you asked the question earlier, like how long does it take to get this implemented? And the answer to that one is it depends on how much trust already exists in the team, but usually somewhere between 2 and 6 weeks if I'm having a meeting a week. I had a guy come in recently to a team who worked for me before, and his first comment was after the first team meeting he attended was they don't understand how much power they have, and so he set about trying to demonstrate that to them because there just wasn't any trust there. And so as they started to trust each other, that they could be vulnerable, that they could say, I don't understand this, or this needs better explaining, or what have you, that came along. In the first time, in the beginning, Manon, all I want them to do is solve one or two easy problems that are, I don't even care if they have much of an impact. I just want them to actually be able to say, I solved that. And I want to be able to like, hey, way to go. You identified a problem, you solved it. This is now better. Keep going. So if I can just get that done, if that's 5% of our total calories, great. My goal with an operations team is to reach 40% internally facing work improvements and 60% the work for directly for the business. Pardon me, that's for an operations team because so much of what you have to do is already maintenance anyway. For development teams, I try to at least get to 20% of that making things better, and 80% would generally be considered feature work or bug fixes. Yeah. So I start small, and then I keep growing. And if I'm at the C level, I'm talking to my peers. I'm like, this is what's actually happening here, and this is where I'm trying to get. And you should watch people just lose their mind. You want 40% of your blah 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 to do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, yeah. And so it's a struggle, but because I'm trying to implement across a period of time rather than just say 40% now, I'm building trust with my executive peers because they're seeing the team or the teams operate better and better and better. They're getting more of what they want because we're doing that. And so usually somebody will point out, it's also usually the chief product officer, hey, things are getting, we're seeing higher quality, we're seeing more, more features, show up on my doorstep. Yeah, yada yada yada. So it's not a you turn it on, you turn it off. There's a very long tail to all of that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,